So as I said, we're going to be starting in a couple of minutes with the presentation by Renee Reid. So just get some coffee or something, tell everyone, tell your friends in the meantime, and we're going to be there in a bit. Yeah, people are starting to tune in. That's nice to see. Oh, we have Nettie from Germany. Nice. And Brenda Young from North Carolina. Oh my God. Wesley from Groningen. Amsterdam, of course. Oh, cool. All around the world. That was also the idea. So Brenda is also moving to New York City in the fall. Good luck with that. And I'm back on the picture. So I'm going to start now. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm Kelly, and these are my team, Bertka, Jolaine, and Sarah, who is now just left the chat. But we are together at UXify Eindhoven. So first, I'm going to give a quick introduction of how the event is going to go today. For some people, it's already the evening. For some of you, it's just the morning, starting the day. So thank you and welcome everyone, regardless where you are in the world. And today we have a very special guest who is Renee Reid from LinkedIn. But first, are you seeing my screen? I think you are. First, we're gonna start with a bit of UXify Eindhoven. So as I mentioned, it's the four of us. And who are we? We are passionate about UX. We are designers, startuppers, developers, students from juniors, seniors, experts. We are now more than 1,100 UXifiers from Eindhoven in the world. So we are also looking into our branding now that we've gone global. And you can follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And of course, in Meetup, where we're always posting the events and some content that we create. So we are now in the new series. We always work with a series of events, and this time is about UXify meets big tech. What we want to do is go on a global level with UX experts from different organizations all around the world, and they're going to share their knowledge in different aspects of UX. And yeah, we're going to learn from them how big is big tech. And of course, about culture, because we're going to meet people from America, like Renee, but also in Europe and Asia. So yeah, our first stop, as I mentioned, is, give me a second, is Silicon Valley with Renee from LinkedIn. So who is Renee? Some of you already know her. She's a staff UX researcher at LinkedIn, where she has led research projects across search and discovery, trust and privacy, and identity. She's a dynamic UX speaker. She has presented at Georgia Tech and multiple conferences on design research and topics ranging from human-computer interaction to diversity in UX. She has activated her research interviewing superpowers and launched her own podcast titled Tech Rap Queen, where she interviews guests across tech, design, and culture. So if you're not following the Tech Rap Queen, go do it right now, because it's very interesting discussions about design and culture. Last week, she was part of the panel of the Transform Her conference, and she will soon be featuring in the State of Black Design Conference on April 9th, 2021. So you can also follow her with that event coming up. Well, Renee is gonna today share all her wisdom with us. And if you want to interact with us, please do so and join us via Jitsi. So some of us are already in Jitsi, and it would be nice if some of you can join. and not only follow it via YouTube. If you have questions, you can ask them directly to Renee. So that's really nice. So go now to the Jitsi. We will be welcoming you right in a bit. Yeah, so with no further ado, I want to give the floor to Renee.
Thank you, Kelly. I guess that would be the intro when I come on stage. I would usually have music, a little walk-on music to come on stage. Applause, applause, applause.
Exactly.
Hi, everyone.
And also the fireworks, okay? Don't forget the fireworks.
Yes, lots of fireworks.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Kelly. Did you want to say anything else before I take over here?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, did I miss something in such a long portfolio that you have of all the things that you're doing, and the woman with 30 hours a day I've never seen before?
People have asked, do I have a twin? Am I really triplets? No, I am one person doing many amazing things. And yeah, I'll talk about kind of what's up next on the radar. So thank you for going through all of that. I appreciate it. All right.
Let's start. Yeah.
Let's go ahead and start. As Kelly said, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you are. It is such a joy that even in these moments of being in a pandemic, we still have this capability of coming together in spaces and in events like this. So there is a silver lining that I think even in these moments, we've actually drawn even closer and been really intentional about bringing the world even closer. So I love to do these type of international conferences and events. Greetings from a sunny California here in Silicon Valley. I'm still on my first cup of coffee, so if I stop and take a couple of sips, that is why, because I usually 2 coffees in, but I'm still on my first one here. So we're going to have a great discussion. This is a topic that is near and dear and true to my heart because I've been through a lot of this. So I hope that you have pencil, paper. I'm old school. I like to write things down as I'm watching speakers, or if you have your notepad or iPad, however you like to take notes. I always invite people to be active listeners, or if you have your notepad or little feedback. This is technology. This is what happens. Little feedback. But it's all good. We're gonna get through it. Like I have to try to figure out my lighting. So I'll be adjusting light as the sun starts doing its own thing. So let's get into it. I am gonna open up my presentation, and technology is gonna work and cooperate with me today. So give me a second as I share my screen, hopefully. And I think I am sharing. All right. Can someone give me a thumbs up if they see my screen? I think I'm good. Excellent.
Yeah, we see your screen.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kelly. Okay. Well, that's interesting. If my camera is off, if my camera's on, you can't see my screen, right?
No, that's the thing with Jitsi.
Oh, so I'm just going to be a voice behind the slides. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, you learn something new every day. Okay, so I may be popping in and out because I like for the audience to be able to see my face as well. So we're just gonna make it happen here. All right, so I'm gonna go back to the presentation. Be completely flexible and going with the flow here. Okay, so we're gonna talk about leadership in individual contributor world. And so, again, this topic is really important, especially at a time like this where people are navigating, or anytime really, when people are navigating their careers and not knowing, about career paths and career trajectories. And a lot of this I had to learn by trial and error and figuring it out. So I'm giving you a little bit of a playbook as someone who's kind of gone through this. So hopefully you'll be able to take some information as I go through this presentation.
Question, Renee, do you want to take the questions during the presentation, or do we keep it at the end as a round of questions?
Well, I'll pause and midway, because I can't, like, I'll be flipping back and forth because the screen that I'm on now, I can't advance the slides, and so I have to flip to the presentation. So I can't. I only have one monitor right now. So yada yada yada. Okay, so I'll just pause to get questions throughout this.
Okay, so if you have any questions, please ask it on the YouTube, or you can also join us in the Jitsi and ask your questions here. Okay.
So I'll just pause to get questions throughout this.
Okay, so if you have any questions, please.
I have to say someone's not on mute. Okay. All right. So let's get into it here. So as Kelly mentioned, and I'll mention this later on, definitely listen and subscribe to my podcast. I have leaders and innovators from all over tech, design, and culture who actually talk about a little bit of that I'm talking about today, about what success looked like for them, their leadership path. So just more learnings that you can have even after this presentation. So how are we going to spend our time today? So I'm going to start with just a brief story. I always like to context set so people know exactly who they're talking to and understanding my pathway a little bit. And then we'll go into the actual IC versus manager tracks, and then give you some takeaways. And I also like to talk about the putaways, things that you need to put away. A lot of times when we come to these events and conferences, we're always taking a lot of information in, but it's important to kind of put some other things away as well as you're learning new things. So I like to call it takeaways and putaways. And then we'll open up the floor for formalized questions and ask me anything sessions. So presentation runtime is about 40 to 45 minutes, and then we'll open it up the floor for some questions. So I invite you, I always start with this picture because I like for people to get settled and just kind of be present. A lot of times we're running around, we're doing multitasking, and the times we're working from home and we've got kids, family, pets all around. What you're doing right now in this next hour, you are investing in yourself. You've come to this presentation because you want to learn something. So make sure you're doing yourself a favor in being present and taking this time and investment to learn and grow and apply it in your day-to-day. So I invite you to be, again, active listeners and active participants in this time. And thank you for this amazing group for putting this together. So let's start out really quickly with this visual. So this is what you call the design scribble. And so this is something that's taught a lot in academia or shown in the design world here in the US as a depiction of the design process. And this illustration was created by Damien Newman. He was a designer at IDEO, the world-renowned design firm and design agency. And he created this design squiggle to illustrate to a client what the design process looks like. It's kind of messy in the beginning. You're trying your need finding, you're probably trying to figure things out. And then along the way, things start clearing out. You start to get more direction. You're going from divergent to convergent ideation. And so it starts to kind of get this you're on the right track, or you're on this kind of path. But in the beginning, it's really messy, right? So it's an amazing visual depiction. I like to say that Damien, unbeknownst to him, was actually creating a depiction of my career path, my career journey in UX. And some of you may resonate with that because your path to UX was not linear. It was a bunch of zigzags and ups and downs and backs and forths and around and round until you finally saw the UX light and you hit the ground running. And now you are this just passionate UX practitioner. And the beauty of that is that this is actually one continuous line. There is no breaks in this illustration. It is one continuous line that illustrates the power and impact of all the mess and confusion in the beginning, still is part of this straight way of clarity. And I always like to start to tell people, even in the midst of the journey of ups and downs and zigs and zags, that is your journey. That is what you need to own in your UX journey, because that is what's going to empower you. And so when we talk about individual contributor and manager, a lot of times people are searching for, who I am as a UX practitioner. And I always encourage people to take those experiences that you've had along your journey to help set you up for your path along the way as UX. And I'll talk really briefly about just how I had to learn that on my journey. So I gave a talk 2 years ago at a conference called Enterprise UX. Oops, this way. And you can YouTube this talk, and I go through my whole career path. So you get to hear everything about me going through the recession in 2008. I had my degree and I couldn't find a job, and I had to be a waitress and a hostess. And then, eventually landing a position where I was able to pivot into UX. So I go into detail about my journey in this talk. And I also talk about the fact of being this Voltron. So this is it was a cartoon that actually started in Japan and was picked up in the US. And some of you may be familiar. This was pre-Transformers, okay? So for those who are Transformer fans, it all started with Voltron. And Voltron's superpower was the fact that there were all these components, the arms, the legs, are all individual superheroes that come together to form Voltron, this mega power robot superhero who's able to do these amazing things. And that's how I've really owned my journey as a UX practitioner. I've owned my journey as someone who started out as a project manager, then went into sales. Then, like I said, I had to be a waitress and a hostess, and then going into customer success, and then finally becoming a UX researcher and, starting my pathway there. And when I first started my career as a UX researcher and a practitioner, as an IC, an individual contributor, I thought I had to drop all the experiences that I had to become this UX researcher. I had to learn all the things in the discipline in the field and then, do this huge pivot. And what I realized finally, the awakening that I had, was that I was better as the sum of all my experiences than trying to become a whole new person as a professional. By the time I made the pivot into UX, I was 15 years into my professional experience. That's a lot of experience, 15 years. And I was literally about to throw all of that away. I'm going to come back right quick. I was literally about to throw all of that away because I wanted to become this new UX person. And I finally had a moment of reflection that said, no, that's gold, to be able to have all that experience and apply it to my my newfound UX skills. And I want to make sure I start there so that you start thinking about your own journey into UX, that you can start leveraging when you're making these career decisions about being an individual contributor or a manager, that you're actually probably more powerful and more skilled to do amazing work as a leader as an individual contributor than you think. Because you're probably thinking, okay, if you're just starting out in UX, that's great. You still can bring up experiences in academia as well. But you're thinking like, oh, I only have 2 years experience in UX and I only have, 1 year of experience in UX. And I know that's what the job descriptions say and how the job postings go. So it almost tries to minimize you, right? But you as a person need to understand your total package, the things that you're bringing, all those collective experiences. And that's how you begin to start having a mind shift of how you're able to exceed and excel as an individual contributor, because you're bringing a lot more experience than you're thinking of. So Yes, remember that you're the sum and more powerful when you're able to bring all your experiences together. So again, I'll just fly through this, the experiences, all the different paths. And then when I'll go back, became an associate researcher, then became a researcher, and then was able to, get promoted as a senior researcher, a staff researcher, and really start my career as an individual contributor. And that was, 6 years, 7 years as an individual contributor. And so in basic terminology, the individual contributor does not have any direct reports. You are not hiring, you're not a hiring manager, you don't have necessarily a team. And whereas a manager, you have direct reports. You are responsible for someone's growth. You are not, necessarily doing the day-to-day work. As a designer, things like that, you're leading a team. You're in C-suite executive meetings, things like that. So just at the very bare minimum, individual contributor, no direct reports. Manager, you do have direct reports. And I do want to emphasize again, one of the clear distinctions a lot of times as a manager, you are no longer necessarily doing the day-to-day work of designing, researching, doing discovery research. Not that you shouldn't still have those skills to be able to jump in when needed, but you're not doing the tactical work of a designer all the time. You're doing organizational things, scoping things as well. And the reason why I want to lean in on that is because if you are someone who likes to do that stuff, that's where your passion lies in creating and being kind of the source of that information, doing the research. Then you have to understand, as a manager, you're not necessarily doing that. You're giving a lot of that up. And so if you thrive in that sense of creating and having that type of impact in your designs and research, the individual contributor route is probably the best place. So I'm taking kind of what the path of each one of these look like in different positions. So these titles that you're seeing here are pretty consistent in the UX tech space here in Silicon Valley in terms of the trajectory. So as an individual contributor, researcher, designer, your pathway can look something like senior, and I'm sorry, before senior, you have, associate, the IC, just a regular designer, then you move into senior. The word staff here is, again, above senior and takes on, leadership roles, strategizing roles. And so you're doing a little more leadership and, the IC work. And the word staff is taken from engineering leveling. So that's something that's really synonymous in the engineering world. And so a lot of times product and design take on those same type of leveling to kind of match, so people understand, who they're dealing with, and they understand like the levels, and to have a consistency across the levels in all the different positions like engineering, design, and research and product. So, and then you can move on to senior staff, and then the principal level, right? Big subject matter expert here, and then senior principal. And so with this IC route, your leadership capabilities really can come through and have this really longevity and trajectory in an individual contributor role. And so that's why, in tech, people are, outside of the salaries and things like that, when you are with companies that you actually can see the career growth, you begin to understand how you can navigate as an individual contributor versus making the jump over to manager. Is someone not on mute? Can everyone just check their phones or check their screens? So as individual contributors, and here's the thing, a lot of times people make the leap to manager because they don't see a career path as an individual contributor. And I blame that a lot of times on the system and the companies and not creating those pathways for individual contributors. And what ends up happening is you have people who are in management that shouldn't be managers because they just had nowhere else to grow. So they're just like kind of moved over to management when they really probably should have just stayed as an IC, grown there, had leadership there and be more impactful. And so the system is not set up effectively in a lot of places where this growth as leadership in this individual contributor can happen. And so I challenge you, as you look at your career and you're looking at your trajectory, be very intentional about seeking places out that have these very clear career paths for people to grow as an individual contributor. And so, you should be empowered to ask recruiters, hiring managers, hey, what does the career path look like for someone who's coming in as a senior? Where does that go? If the answer is always management, that's a problem. That's a problem. That shouldn't always be the career path, because what ends up happening, how many managers do you have? How many IC people you have? Then you have all these people gunning for one position, trying to go after the manager position. And you get a lot of, infighting of who's going to be next on the promotion chain to get to that next manager position, because there's not enough manager positions. And so you get infighting, and it could just cause a lot of hostility for no reason, because people don't see a way out. You have a lot of organizations that are being a lot more flat to help not have as much hierarchy, to help alleviate a lot of what I'm talking here. So there's not a lot of, having to shuffle people over to management because there's no individual career path. So you'll have like more flat organizations where there's not necessarily a lot of management career pathing. So takeaway here for individual contributor and career pathing, this is a very clear career path. This is at LinkedIn. This is at a couple of other tech companies. So I would just implore you to just be intentional about investigating what does your individual career path look like at the current role that you're in at another company that doesn't have to lead to management. And then when we switch over to manager, you see kind of where it can look like here on the manager side. You can start out as a lead, go into manager, go into senior manager, director, and then after that is usually VP and on up. Now, let me be clear. If that is your goal, to become a manager, you want to climb up the executive chain, so be it. Like, all the best to you. What I am trying to challenge people to think is that you don't have to necessarily have the success that you're looking for as a manager, because you think, number one, you're going to make more money. Because again, this is how the system's made up. So it's not our fault, but the system is made up like, in order to make more money, you have to be a manager. When you have really good career pathing systems set up, there are actual principal people who are making more than managers. Let me say that again. There are actually people on the IC track who make more than managers. So if money is your objective, that kind of levels the playing field now. You don't have to have a team to make the money. You can be the individual contributor. And so, like I said, tech is really good about setting up these systems. There's a couple other industries that have this, not many. But if you are a manager and you have the capability to help individual contributors in their space grow better, I challenge systems to make sure that the playing field of career growth has high potential for individual contributors. And we'll see a lot more people actually be more intentional about seeking out the real positions and the real places that they thrive in, instead of getting people who in management who shouldn't be managers. And I can attest, in my own 20 plus career, I've had the worst of the worst, and I've had the best of the best. And I am so fortunate that I'm at the ladder where I have the best of the best managers, directors, VPs that are truly supportive of my career growth, of my career trajectory, and I'm able to thrive and shine as, well, we'll talk about that in a second, in my individual contributor realm. And it just makes a difference. It makes a difference when you yourself can see what good management looks like. You know how many people have switched over to management and they have no clue what good leadership looks like, what good managers look like? And then what happens? Bad produces bad. And you just get this cycle of people managing people that have no clue because they've never had an example. So I want you to be empowered to own your journey as an individual contributor and create your own path. You don't have to make those pivots to management and to leadership if that's not what you want to do, especially if money is the factor. There are plenty of individual contributors doing exceptionally well financially, and have that gain and are able to become thought leaders and are able to become very respected in their field without having the manager. So I'm trying to demystify and debunk a lot of what we've just been programmed to think, right? In order to be a leader, you have to have these managers or have to have a team. No, you can be a thought leader. You can be a leader in your space as an individual contributor. And I'll talk about that in a second. Quick time check. All right, good. Making good time. I'm going to come off camera and go back to sharing. All right. So I know that was a lot of time there. So you have to do a self-assessment along this journey to really ask yourself, where do you want to go? I tell this a lot to the people who I mentor. You have to think in terms of chess. You have to think about not necessarily your next move, but the move after next. What is going to set you up for the best position to get you to that next role along your path? And so, again, if you are wanting to, be known as an amazing designer, be able to create, great type of experiences and things like that, management is probably not the space where you're going to be able to go to become or be known as that amazing designer who's able to create things that people envy and they want to mimic, right? But you can be an amazing principal designer, again, a thought leader who's able to still kind of stay in the wheelhouse of creating things and having that greater impact on product because of the way that you're designing, like literally physically designing. So you have to do that self-check and check in with yourself of what do you want? Where do you want to go? And slide. There is this again, this is an American thing. So there was this huge meme with the quote, this is a gentleman who actually had a song that said, again, where the money resides. Like if the money's your motivation, then you kind of, that you can navigate in that IC space. But if you want to be more of that creative, you want to be more creative, you can stay in that IC space. If you want to develop people, let me go back real quick. If you want to develop people, if you want to invest the time in pouring into other people, because maybe you've gotten to a place in your career that, you have excelled as an individual contributor, you have done your due diligence and you know the craft, you've had this experience, and now you're a manager and you're able to pour into people and develop people, then yes, go for it. Be a people leader. The thing about it is, where people realize, when you're a manager, it is not about your success. It's about the success of your team. And people literally forget that. And you have managers who are trying to outshine their individual contributors because they really haven't experienced the individual contributor route enough, where they've had that opportunity to lean into their work and have impact in their work and be able to shine, as an individual contributor. And then again, I've seen it all. You get managers who are trying to outdo their individual contributor team. And you don't want that. As a manager, you are developing people. You are pouring in. Their success is your success. And so you have to have that real heart to heart with yourself. So as individual contributor, you can have that success as a leader, in growing and having impact and having the capability to be seen, again, as a leader, without having to manage people and develop people. Where do you thrive and where do you flourish? Being a manager, you have to be able to take the time to help others thrive and help others flourish. But as an individual contributor, you're going to be able to really spend that time to help, make sure that you're thriving and you're flourishing in your career and becoming a lot more focused. And so a lot of this is also being mindful of where you're planted and where you are. So, the teams that you're in, the organizations that you are in. I know, this sounds all good and great what I'm talking about, but a lot of this is really predicated on the environments that you're trying to thrive and you're trying to flourish. If your environment is not set up where you are able to plant yourself as an individual contributor to thrive and flourish, then yes, it is going to be a lot harder. But I challenge you to find other spaces where you can thrive and flourish in your career as a UX practitioner that's not necessarily tied to your job all the time. I've been able to, is that my next slide? So as an individual contributor, a quick, self-story, I've been able to thrive and flourish in other spaces as a thought leader, as someone. I'm able to thrive and flourish in my day-to-day job as well. So that's, even better when I can do it in both places, but both internally and externally. And, as individual contributors, you need, or even as managers, but you want to make sure that if you are a UX practitioner and you are a designer and you are a researcher, you are that person, whether you are at a company or you're outside that company. That if that's who you are as a professional, then it doesn't necessarily need to be tied to the company's name. You need to own your journey as that UX practitioner as an individual as well. And so again, it's a mind shift of thinking, well, are you a designer if you're not working at the company? Yes. Yes, you are. You should be designing and creating things that are not necessarily tied to a position or a role all the time. And so that's where you begin to start thinking about how you can thrive. Now, yes, the company and having the salary that pays for you to create those things is fantastic, of course. But you want to make sure that you're really leaning into what are the spaces that I thrive and flourish in that will help me grow in my career. That is not necessarily always tied to a company, a title. You have to define, what does success look like for you? So again, where do you want to go? And what does the success look like for you? It doesn't and shouldn't look the same for everyone. Not everyone wants to become a manager. You don't have to subscribe to the notion that the manager route is the success route, because this is what we've just been programmed. You have to become a manager. That's how you show that you're growing. No, it's not. Success to you could be staying the individual contributor, having, impact in your industry, you can do that as an individual contributor. You don't need a manager title to do that. And I've been very successful. I speak of myself. I've been very successful as a speaker, as a mentor, as a subject matter expert, as a thought leader, as an individual contributor without title, without, VP of this behind my name or things like that. And so you should be empowered to understand, what does success look like for you? If writing a book on the subject matter that you are interested in your design field, in the UX field, if that's what success looks like to you, then you define that. Don't let the system define that for you. Again, just a quick snapshot of just what I've been able to do. Conference speaker, panelists, different organizations. And I'll give you my website so you can see a lot of this, and you'll be able to, I have another slide. Just tons of different talks and things like that I've been able to, basically have a presence and get called upon to do things like this. And, just growing within my career as an individual contributor and being able to do these type of things has been so empowering. And this takes a lot of time. I've got to do my day job. I'm also doing these, preparing for talks. And that's a lot of time investment that I couldn't necessarily do if I'm trying to build a team. So when you think about IC, and I'm going to close out here in a second, when you think about IC, I like to use the phrase IC leadership. Not just individual contributor, but individual contributor leadership. And you begin to start thinking differently in terms of how you are positioning yourself. The IC term, sometimes in our heads, it almost, again, because that's how the way the systems are set up, it almost sounds like it could be subordinate to everything else. And what I'm trying to say is that it's not. It is just a different path that can run alongside management that you can take, but don't look at it as a subordinate less than. You can have leadership within your individual contributor careers. It is important as an individual contributor for you to find your voice. Lean into the power of who you are. I'll go back to where I started. Remember the total sum of who you are. A lot of times when, new UX practitioners or when you're starting out in the field, you're intimidated because you're not sure. And you get it. Like we all go through it as we're learning along the way. But be empowered to know that you have skill sets and capabilities that other people may not have because they did not have the same journey as you to become a designer, to become a UX researcher, to become, your UX UX copywriter. So find your voice. The way that I was able to find my voice was really leaning into the fact that I was a pivoter into UX, someone who had this career trajectory that included project management, sales, customer service, and also leaned into the fact, like, listen, I had to become a waitress and a hostess for a time. And I had to become that too. And instead of putting that on a shelf and kind of being ashamed of like, well, how does that fit into UX? Oh, it does fit into the UX as a researcher. You bet. As a waitress, I had to anticipate and think about what does this person's experience look like? How do I want to make sure that I am giving them the best experience at anticipating their needs and what problem we need to solve? Like all of that, I've been able to connect the dots. And so I've been able to use my voice as a UX researcher by empowering myself with the skill sets with the total sum. So once you start having that mental shift about who you are, you begin to say, oh, wait a minute, I do have some skills here. And you can lead in those spaces where your voice can be amplified and used in a way that you, again, start to set yourself apart, that you can become a subject matter expert, a leader within UX by really crafting your own story, because a lot of times with your own journey and experiences. So find your voice for sure. Don't just find it, you have to use it too. I tell people all the time, did you find it? Yes. Did you use it? Well, gotta make sure you find it and you use it. So, find spaces and places where you can use it. Start within your teams, start within your company. How can you start leaning into, leadership type experiences within the work that you're doing? Now, I'm not saying that you have to do more work and not get paid for it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there's a fulfillment in knowing that you are doing even better work when you realize that you're using your voice. You're empowered because you're creating kind of this experience for yourself. And you can begin to grow as an individual contributor, someone who can lead in different ways. So I'm going to quickly talk about elevating and amplifying within the individual contributor realm, which is really important. Because again, I think a lot of times when people think that because they're not in management, they can't elevate or amplify themselves. And I'm here to tell you, don't think like that. So elevate, amplify your work, and elevate and amplify your worth as individual contributors. So thinking about your work, level up your work with subject matter expertise. What's the area of design, research, copywriting? Like what is your specialty in what you're doing, and lean into how you are differentiating yourself as a thought leader, as someone who is able to speak to that subject very clearly and confidently. And so I actually got my master's in human computer interaction and design much later in my career, when I was already in industry as a UX practitioner. And I loved that because I was able to apply the academic rigor to my work, like real time as I was learning. And so what I've done, which has been really great, is really help to connect the empirical information that academia has in the spaces of UX research and the incredible work that's being done in academia that industry hasn't leveraged enough, I think, especially in tech. And so I've been really championing the fact of triangulating academic work with industry work more often to really, again, bring in the rigor of research and what's being done. And so that helps me as a subject matter expert, as an IC, really like level up my research. And so teams, leaders, executives now have, a clear understanding of, who I am as a researcher. So think about that in your own workspace. How are you being seen, within your team, outside of your team, partners? What could they say about you as an individual contributor? Make sure you're getting broader visibility in your projects, right? What impacts are you having, not just with your team, but in the business? Again, how do people think about your work that you're doing? Are you the person that they say, hey, I know this person will have the knowledge and the capabilities to execute and also be able to strategize on this work? Is something that a person that we want to bring in? And you begin to leverage that. When there's big projects, when there's things, again, not extra work, but the important stuff, people begin to see you as someone who they can elevate and amplify because of how you're able to lead in your spaces. And then, listen, advocate for your work. Advocate for your skill sets. Advocate for what you're doing, the impact and the power that you are having. If your manager is not doing it for you, then that's a different conversation and a different problem. But again, because as a manager, they should be helping to, make you as successful as possible. But you need to hold your manager accountable, your teams accountable about the work that you're doing, and advocate for good UX. I say this all the time. You cannot be a UX practitioner and not advocate for the industry as a whole, not just for your work. We should set expectations on what good UX looks like. And so we have a responsibility as individuals within our teams, within our companies, to ensure that we're doing the industry justice. So elevate and amplify your work. This is a quote by the great author, anthropologist, Zora Neale Hurston. If you don't know her, if you've never read her books, her most famous book was Their Eyes Were Watching God, a staple of the American authorship. But she was mainly an anthropologist. She's done incredible research with Black communities in the US, Haiti, and Jamaica. But she had this quote about research is formalized curiosity. It is poking and prying with a purpose. And when you think about you as yourself as a UX practitioner and the work that you're doing and the purpose in which you're doing it, again, look at the power and the impact that you're having as an individual contributor and lean into that and know that your work has a purpose to move not just a company forward, but move the lives of individuals, communities. So, and not to sound all fluffy and stuff, but just know that, the impact that your work has really helps you start rethinking and retooling how you approach your path as an individual contributor. So elevate and amplify your work, elevate and amplify your worth as an individual contributor. Hone into what makes you uniquely you. I talked about this in UX, own your journey, do an assessment. So a lot of times we just forget about all the different skills that we bring that really differentiates us from other people. Lean into that. Know your internal and external value. I mentioned this before. Know the impact that you have as a designer, not just within your company, but outside your company. Know the impact that you can have outside as a thought leader. And I'm not just saying like you have to do talks all the time and you have to do these guest panels. You may just write, you may just have, I know Twitter design is a little bit interesting, I think. But you can have spaces where you elevate and amplify who you are, and people will recognize that. And so, just find your happy space where you thrive. Yeah, I love people who are able to write all the time. I am not a writer. I wish I was. I wish I could just write blogs and blogs and blogs. I have so many that I've started and have not finished. I've got all these great topics and ideas, haven't finished them because I'm just not a writer. I'm a talker though. So that's where I leaned into my strength. And I was like, I can do a podcast. I can tap into my research skill. I'm talking to people all the time. This is perfect. And so now I've created a space where I'm able to elevate, amplify my work, my worth in a space that is true to me. And so that it's outside of the company. So I'm not defined by my title inside the company. I've got these other places where I can thrive and flourish. And again, be able to, have that leadership mindset. And it's so powerful that the company sees it. My organization sees it. They see the brand recognition that I'm bringing just by default. And so they understand my value. Like, oh my gosh, Renee's able to bring a crowd now. We've got to kind of protect this thing. Again, you have to define what success looks like for you. And don't subscribe to what the path looks like. Again, this is me talking as an individual. Like I'm always someone who jumps off the path. I'm always going to color outside the lines. I want to define it for myself. Use this as a guide, but you have to define it for yourself, which is important. Finally, let's see, cursor. I love this quote by Arlen Hamilton. If you don't know her, she is a venture catalyst, as she's called. supporting and investing in amazing startups. And it's from her book, It's About Time. It's About Damn Time. But she talks about being the money. Be the money. You have the power to, because of your worth, that people will invest, and you begin to work for you. Not that you're always chasing titles and positions at companies, but you begin your brand, your leadership. Those things begin to help elevate and amplify who you are, and you are the prize. You are the money. Be the money. And then give yourself permission. Again, the main thing here with give yourself permission is writing your own path to success that doesn't have to be defined by a certain blueprint that's been played out for a long time. Management does not have to be the place that you have to your North Star. It doesn't have to be. If it is, great. But I encourage people to find their successes as individual contributors, because that is, for me, I think that's what makes more impactful managers. There's too many people, and I've seen this over my career, who have jumped into management that they have not even had the successes as individual contributors, that they don't know what it looks like. So how can you tell your team, who is filled of individual contributors, what that looks like? So here's just the list side by side. Lean into your leadership as an individual contributor by elevating and amplifying your work, leveling it up, get visibility, advocate for yourself in good UX, and elevate and amplify your worth. Hone in and own your journey, understand your internal and external value, and give yourself permission to lead in the spaces that you're in. And then make sure you are thriving and flourishing. So connect with me. If you are on LinkedIn, I hope everyone is saying yes and nodding their head. And you have your phone available. Quickly go to the LinkedIn. Everyone has the LinkedIn app. Yes, everyone's nodding. Quickly go to the LinkedIn app. If you open up the LinkedIn app, you will see, or if you have an iPhone, you can just go to your camera and just scan this QR code. But you can also go to the LinkedIn app and go to the search bar and click on this little icon that's on the right-hand side that looks like a QR code. Once you open that up, it will open up your camera. If you've used it before, you can go ahead and scan. If you haven't, it's going to ask you to give permission. Everyone who has a LinkedIn profile has their own QR code. So where you're scanning, if you look at the top, it'll say scan my code. You can actually download your own code. It never fails that whenever I do this, people are like, oh my gosh, what? I never knew this existed. Are you kidding me? It's a discovery problem, we know. I'm passionate about this because this was my project, and you're talking to the researcher who helped bring this to life. But it's such a great feature, especially if you're doing your own presentations, just to have your QR code up on the screen. Once you scan the QR code, you can connect. If you don't see the connect button, just hit the ellipsis, the 3 dots. Or is it more? I forgot if we changed it. But then you can click on that and go to more and then scan. And then here are all my other social media handles. Oh, wait. The logo didn't come through. That first one is Clubhouse. I am on the house. So find me on Clubhouse at the Renee on the Twitterverse. My website, and also Instagram. And yeah, I know there's a lot of information. We're right at the top of the hour, so it's perfect. And I will end with this piece of information. Oh my gosh, I almost just hit the red button to I almost hit to disconnect. I'm so glad. I was like, I will end with this piece of information. So if you're on my if you're on my LinkedIn profile and you happen to be investigating and look, you will see not staff UX researcher on my LinkedIn profile anymore. You actually see manager. So fun. This is a great way to end this. So I've recently made the switch over and was promoted to manager. And so I give this talk for the first time as a manager, not as an IC anymore. But what I'm excited about is that I chose to go into management at the time where I felt like it was time for me now to start investing into other people and growing other people, because I've had this success as an individual contributor and I know what it looks like. And so now I'm able to become a people manager with so much passion to develop people, because I have a clear understanding of what success can look like. And so I'm excited to become a manager and spend that time investing I am a manager. I think again, mind shift change. I am a manager. And what's great is I've been leading as an individual contributor, so I can continue on with that same passion to lead. Oh, there it is. We have to do the quick flash. The quick one too.
Kelly's on it.
It's just a little magic. Just a little sleight of the hands.
Give me a second. I have to try to do
it's
it
all
again.
good. It's good because it was perfect timing, because part of the presentation was already done.
Yeah, no, like it's just that they do that. That's kind of what they do.
It's all good.
Should start. Let me check. Like we were expecting this. So first thing, don't panic.
Let
me check. Should be now. Are we back?
It'll probably be a delay. Yes, it looks like it's back.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Okay.
Just a quick coffee break. That's all, friends.
No, yeah, wait. Yeah.
Just a quick coffee break. But yeah,
Renee, that was so amazing. I think we're all like super inspiring, so much content. You said like, oh, bring your paper and pen. I had a
That was so weird.
Yeah, are we back? What is happening? Okay.
It's technology, friends.
You broke the internet, Renee. So
it seems like you're back.
Yeah, no, so no, to start, thank you so much. You said I'll bring pen and paper, and I was like, I have it anyway for the questions from the audience. But I'm just taking all the notes, because it's so much information. So thank you for sharing this. I've known you already. I mean, for a few months now, you are my mentor. So I'm very honored that you took the time to share your knowledge, not only with me, but also, with the rest of the network, because there's like so many points here to take, I think, for the rest. So first of all, thank you so much for sharing.
Of course.
Yeah. And let's go to some questions. No, and also I want I was thinking like, so you're now a manager, so you sold out actually. No, it's just a joke. Let's check some questions. So one that I think very interesting from Daria. Personal branding is very important. How did you find your special angle, unique selling point, if you will?
Yeah, that's a constant question. And that's why I was telling people it is so important to take inventory of your own story and own that journey. And like I said, I found and used my voice as being a pivoter into UX, and found a huge community of people who, again, not everyone goes through university and knows this very early in their career. And so I was able to find a huge community of people who were hungry for that type of content, because I knew I couldn't be alone as the only person who pivoted. But you just didn't hear about it, right? You just heard about all the top universities, all the top programs and things like that. And I was like, I had to kind of figure this out on my own. And so I just leaned into who I was, or who I am, not who I was, who I am. And it's been the most rewarding when I wasn't trying to fit into a box. And so that has allowed me to stand out in interviews, and as I was, journeying. And so before I came to LinkedIn, I had interviewed at almost all of the top tech companies, had on-sites, was able to get in front of them. And when I would talk to people who had like PhDs, which I love academia, but they were someone who like went through school completely from start to finish and then start an industry, I could see where I could learn from them, but they could definitely learn a lot from me because I had been in industry more than academia, right? I had my undergrad at the time, but I had 15 years of experience. And so that's something that I know that they could not speak to and I could speak to. So you just have to know who you are along your career journey.
In that same line, a personal question, because sometimes you are so deep in that you don't see how you differentiate yourself from the others colleagues even. How do you make that like personal exploration into finding your voice? How do you get deeper into that?
Yeah, you have to, like I said, you have to invest the time into who you are. Like I'm the person who will create mind maps about myself. And I always say this, and I've been saying this a lot, and it's been resonating with people. As UX practitioners, we always talk about having empathy for everyone else. And we ourselves don't even operate with that same level of empathy and understanding for our own selves. And so I just say, flip it around, put yourself as the subject, and invest that type of investigation and understanding into who you are and begin to navigate it like that. It's amazing when I say this, people are like, oh my gosh, that's so right. I don't even take the time to empathize for myself. So yeah, because who else is going to do it? And I'll also just say, I also leaned into who I am. So of course I wear a lot of wraps. This is my thing. I'm an expressive, creative person. And what I didn't see were people who looked like me in the spaces that I was in. So in order to change that and make sure that I had the power to shift the narrative, I made sure that I was showing up as my authentic self so that I can operate fully as a UX practitioner and changing the blueprint, the subscription on what does a UX researcher look like? What does someone in UX look like? Well, someone in UX looks like me, who wears a lot of wraps, who has a podcast. So that point that I made of like, give yourself permission of what it should look like. So in that personal branding, the branding part throws people off. I just tell people operate in who you are, navigate that first. Don't get caught up on the branding.
Good. Questions from the rest, because I can go on and on. So anyone here that would like to ask something to Renee?
Design thinking for personal branding. Yeah.
We have one regarding also culture, because we're doing, as you see, a round the world series, and you are our first guest directly from Silicon Valley. And we were wondering, how do you see also the cultural factor playing a role here?
100%. Like I said, a lot of the success, like I was mentioning as an individual contributor, has and the ability to thrive and flourish has a lot to do with the environment that you're in as well. There's a huge factor. As you can see, I do a lot of metaphors with plants and living things and nature because we can learn so much. So if you don't have like the fertile environment, it's hard to thrive because you're like going against stuff all the time.